Hey everybody, today's video we're going to be doing our first of a series of financial plan or retirement plan case studies. This case study is going to be a married couple who inherits $1 million in their 50s and wants to know what their possibilities are with that money and how impactful and influential is that on their actual retirement timeline. I'm going to pull stuff up on the screen for portions of this video and actually show parts of the plan. But to set the stage for how I'm going to run these case studies, I want to make sure that I explain the lens through which we look at this, which is there's the broad strokes, which is what is the question this person is trying to have answered? And then there are the mechanics or tactical details of tuning dials within the plan. Welcome back to the channel. It's great to see you again. And if you're new here, welcome to the channel. Please, if you could take a moment and like this video and subscribe to the channel, we'd most appreciative. It'll make sure YouTube serves you other great videos just like this. And with that, we'll jump back to the video. In this particular case study, this couple inherits $1 million, give or take, and wants to know if this will make retirement a possibility for them. They haven't been strong savers. They're wondering if all of a sudden this is life-changing money, or can this bring retirement into a more proximate time frame? If they're in their 50s, can they retire at 60, 62, or do they have to retire much later? So the purpose of us going through this case study is to show the things that they can tune and also how they would gather the understanding of whether this is life-changing money. So the first part of going through this case study is to set the stage. Let's give a few details about the couple. I'm not going to go through every account they have here, but what I am going to share are the relevant demographics. So this is a married couple with 2 kids. Their net worth's around $1,800,000, but what's really actually important is their liquid net worth, which is what's spendable. So we're going to extract things from this value, such as cars, houses, property, things like that, because that's not an asset that can be turned into money on a short-term basis for spending, and retirement's all about cash flow. So in this case, if we remove the value of their home, which is $800,000, they have about $1 million net worth at age 57 for Steve and age 53 for Amanda. Both of these are fictional names. The first thing I'm going to show is their retirement probability. Now, if you haven't already watched the video I made that I published called The 3 Types of Retirement Plans, I highly recommend you watch that first. I'm not going to explain the 3 different types of retirement plans, but I am going to use some vocabulary in this video that refers to some of the context set up in that video. Their net worth of $1,800,000, you can tell that if they inherited about $1 million, that is the significant portion of their assets. So in this case, part of the assumption is that they haven't been strong savers, not by any bad decision making, but just by lack of ability, constrained by their incomes and the obligations and responsibilities they had as a family. So that being said, when we go to this Monte Carlo simulation, which presents us with a probability of success. Now, what does that actually mean? The probability of success tells us out of 1,000 trials generated by a simulated computer, how many of those trials are they able to retire at the age we tell the software they will retire at, and then survive until the age we tell the software they will live to without running out of money. So let's say in this case, we're telling the software we want them to retire at age 65 and 61, the software, and then live till age 100. The software tells us that on the right side here, if they change nothing about their current behaviors, with the money invested the way it's invested, their incomes the way they are, their health the way it is, they have a 69% chance of living till age 100 without running out of money based on the simulation. Now, this fits into a category of retirement plans that we call the stabilization phase, which is the middle of 3 types of retirement plans. The first type is a triage phase, where you're just trying to break through and get to about 60% probability of success. That's called triage. The middle is stabilization. That's between 60 and 80%. And then the third we won't really talk about. But a primary goal for us as fiduciary retirement planners is to help people get above the 80% range. Once you get above the 80% range in terms of probability, that's where we feel comfortable with how stable your income will be in retirement from your assets, and also the fact that you will be able to live with a reasonable standard of living. Now, in this case, you can see as a baseline, their probability is 69%. So it's under the comfortable threshold that we like, and we want to get them to a higher percent. Part of what I'm going to show in here is the large mechanisms that allow for the fine tuning to get from where you start out to where you want to go. So the thing to remember here is that the financial plan is actually just a simulation. It's a good directional tool. It tells us directionally where we're headed if we don't change behaviors, or what kinds of simulated effects would happen if we do change behaviors. The important thing to remember here is that it's a dangerous tool in some ways, because sometimes putting in projected changes to your behaviors, let's say you put in a change to your current day spending that then shows a higher probability of success in the future. And then you start making decisions that are changed, or behaviors, you change your own behaviors because you think that the plan shows a higher probability of success, but in actual life, you don't change the behavior of how you're spending. Well, now you have a higher retirement plan probability, but in actuality, when you get to the end line, you're going to be in trouble because you didn't change the real life behavior that would cause the material effect. So it's really important. I wanted to set that because now we're going to look at this plan and we're going to talk about how did we get this couple, this hypothetical couple, from a 69% probability of success to the above 80% range. Also, we're going to talk about what does this mean? 69% tells us that I, as a financial planner, would not be comfortable recommending that this couple retire at the age they've requested to know if they can. At the ages of 65 and 61, which are 8 years away for both members of this couple, their probability of success is a little too low for my comfort. There's just too much margin of error. And when we go into the cash flow in a second, which all of our decisions and recommendations are based on cash flow, you'll see why that also makes me uneasy. So the answer to them initially is, I think it's a little risky if you change nothing about your behaviors for this retirement target you've set for yourself. But that doesn't mean there aren't changes that you can make that can enable the retirement age you prefer. We just have to go through and look at what changes would be required, talk about how palatable and reasonable those would sound for you and your current lifestyle. And if you're willing to make all those changes, then you might still be able to retire at that age. Now, if you're not willing to make all those changes, let's find out what changes and adjustments you are willing to make so that you can then get this to the plan probability that we feel more comfortable with. So to start out, again, this is a call out. If you haven't watched the 3 types of retirement plans videos, I highly recommend watching that because it goes through the 3 phases of retirement planning, but also the actions that are the largest movers in terms of retirement plan success and how much spending you are able to enable in retirement based on those different phases. Now, in this specific case here, this is life-changing money for them for sure, because you could imagine that without that $1 million inheritance, their probability of success is almost 0 because they have no assets to rely upon. But now, even with that $1 million, their plan doesn't have a quite as high of a probability of success as we might like. So let's talk about a few of the changes and we'll make them down below here so you can see what types of things get us from 69% to 82%, but also what things are most material and impactful, because that's also the most important thing. You don't want to change one thing and have no idea how impactful it is, and you don't want to change 6 things and think that one thing is much more impactful than it is. So if I go back here and I bring everything back to the current allocations, the current Social Security claiming strategy that they have, the current retirement ages, and then we start changing one thing at a time, you will start to notice which things have a material effect on their retirement plan success. Now that both sides are even, we can see that the current plan and the draft plan are equal. This basically tells us that with no changes to this person's behavior, they have the same probability of success, 69%. Now let's go change some things. So again, in my other video, you'll see what the biggest movers are. But to repeat a few of them, the biggest movers in terms of retirement success are to work longer, because if you work longer, you have to rely less on retirement assets for fewer years, so you can spend more each year, and it places fewer constraints on your retirement assets. The other options are spend less before retirement, because that will allow you to save more pre-retirement, which germinates and grows and contributes to your retirement nest egg. Another option is to spend less in retirement. Now, those are the most difficult things for most people to commit to, because we want to retire when we want to retire. Sometimes we retire when we're forced to retire. We also are comfortable and know how we're spending, and it's very hard to change spending behaviors. So those are not the first places I would look for a plan in this position, because they're already above 60%. I'm going to start by looking at things like, what if they change their Social Security claiming age and defer it to later? What if they change their investment allocations? Are there things we can do that don't require behavior change? So let's look at what the effects of those things would be. If we change their asset allocation, by the way, this couple has inherited the money within the last year. So their money is mostly in cash. It's not really invested in a normal allocation. So that means it's going to underperform if it sits that way. So let's take it from a current allocation to just a growth, which would be like a 60% stock, 40% bond investment allocation. Let's just only make that change and see what happens. Let's say we make that investment related change for their pre-retirement years, so the next 8 years, and you can see that gives them an additional 3% bump in probability of success. That is not substantial. That is also one of the reasons I wanted to highlight this, because investment changes with short timeframes don't have huge material effects, because we're talking about from 60-40 portfolio to maybe an 80-20 portfolio. You're adding 20% more risk for maybe 1% greater growth per year, which is not that substantial. That's not life-changing results. And you can see that here. Moving from basically in their case, they have a 20% equities or stocks and 80% cash and bonds to a 60-40 gives them only a 3% bump. And that is because they're in the retirement risk zone. They're within 10 years of retirement. They don't have that much time. They're not 30 years making this type of a risk change to their investment portfolio. Now, let's also make their retirement portfolio a little more aggressive. Let's just say we move it from a 50-50 to a 60-40 portfolio. What kind of bump does that give them as well? And I can tell you it's not that substantial. Again, that gives them an additional 1% bump. So that's not substantial. So we can see that, yes, we can fine tune on the investment side, and absolutely we should. That is an optimization that should be done, but that alone is not enough. What if we add to that claiming Social Security at their optimal strategy, which in this case is going to be age 70? You can see that has a pretty substantial effect. That's a 5% probability of success by deferring Social Security from full retirement age, which is 67, to age 70, basically, to their maximum Social Security benefit. That gets them 5%. So that gets us pretty close to the 80% threshold that we are looking and hoping for. What other options might we have? We've looked at investment allocations. We've looked at Social Security. Again, we're looking for things that don't require significant behavior change, because that is the hardest thing to commit to and is also the least reliable in the plan. Modeling behavior change in the plan gives you a probability change that looks good, but you have to then execute on that for many years. In this case, if we decide to actually say, hey, look, there's no other areas to optimize. And in this case, let's say from the simple standpoint, there really isn't that many other areas to optimize. We need to start looking at other areas. We need to start looking at things like pushing retirement out a year or 2 years or whatever. We also need to start looking at things like changes to their pre-retirement spending, or even changes to their post-retirement spending expectations. Or we need to find ways for them to save money. So let's look and see if that's possible. Now we're going to go to their cash flows, and I'm going to show you how their spending looks in current day. So their current day spending, as you can see here, is negative. This column on the right, net flows, is the difference between how much they make and how much they spend. And if it's in parentheses here, it's negative. This means they are overspending by $48,000 a year pre-retirement. So they're basically subsidizing their life through the inheritance money that they've received. Now that's a challenge because, again, I've already set the stage. Behavior change in terms of spending is the most difficult thing to adjust for. So can we carve out more savings for them pre-retirement? Very, very unlikely. I could give the recommendation, but the question is, can they execute on it? If they make $100K a year and they spend $111,000 and have $40,000 in tax payments, they're very unlikely to be able to cut their spending by 50%. That's what this would require. They'd have to cut their expenses from $110,000 to $60,000 roughly just to get to break even. Now you can also see that their planned savings column here is very low. They only save around $3,000 a month as is, and that's just through their employer deferral plan, which is mostly coming in the form of employer contributions. There's no savings room there. We really can't manipulate that. I could change it in the plan, and I'll show you what happens. If we go here and let's say we try to suggest they cut spending pre-retirement by $1,000 a month. So we'll go down here to this dial in expenses. You can see here pre-retirement living expenses. Let's say they move that to $4,200 a month instead of $5,200 a month. That gets us a 4% increase in probability, and it does push us above the 80% threshold. I'm just not comfortable relying on that, because if they can't change that spending by $1,000 a month for the next 8 years, this isn't going to materialize, and we're going to be in trouble later. So we can't rely on this. This would not be a reliable recommendation. This is the problem with financial planning tools. You can put it in, but it doesn't mean it's actually going to work. It will show you the higher probability. You have to still execute on it. That's the trouble. So I'm not going to default to that. I'm going to put this back to 5,200 because I'm not quite comfortable with this scenario when I see $50,000 of negative cash flow, subsidizing living through the inheritance money that they've received with making this type of an adjustment, a recommendation. In this case, it's a much easier recommendation to make to retire a year later. And the reason is because that has them continuing to do something that they're already doing. They're already working. They already know how to work. They don't have to change any behaviors. They already are not retired. So moving their retirement target out 1 year is much, much easier than 8 years of spending changes that require discipline every day, tons and tons of small decisions. This is one decision that once you commit to it, you push it out, much, much easier to execute on. So let's see what happens if we push their retirement age out 1 year. Boom, we get the same effect for far less effort. We get them above 80%. We get them actually to 82%. And they don't have to change spending behaviors in retirement or before retirement. All they have to do is work 1 year longer. Now, this is a much, much better recommendation and plan implementable tool in the planning software because it's much more likely that we can execute on that, assuming that their health is good and there are no other things we can foresee now while they are ages 57 and 53 that indicate that we should be concerned that they wouldn't be able to work 1 more year. Now, the benefit of the working 1 more year is twofold. They continue to have income, meaning they don't have to pull more additional money from their portfolio. They continue to get income from their labor. The other benefit is they have 1 fewer years of retirement that their portfolio also has to support them for. I think this is where we'll wrap up. We're not getting into anything sexy or super specific in the plan because I wanted to show the important movers that actually get us from what I would call an unstable retirement plan to a stable retirement plan and have an opportunity to talk through the principles behind the types of tweaks and changes we can make in here. Now, in my next case study video, I will do a plan that is in what I call the optimization phase. This is where the base plan or the current plan on the right starts at 80% or higher. And now we're not looking at delaying retirement or making changes like that. We might still consider those, but now we can start to explore other optimization tweaks, things like tax planning, Roth conversions, investment-specific distribution changes, charitable giving, legacy planning. That's a separate type of plan. And the way I like to frame this is you can't run before you can walk. If you're in an unstable retirement planning situation, you just need to get to stability, get to solid ground. Start with that first. Prove that you have some options that are reasonable and executable that you can take action on. And then once you do that, now we can start to add optimization tweaks to the plan. So in this case, even for this Steve Zest and Amanda Zest hypothetical situation, if we can arrive at what we would consider planning recommendations that are reasonable to execute on, that I, as a person who does this all the time, matching with the couple we're working with, both agree is reasonable and doable, then we can start to add optimization tweaks to the set of action items in the financial planning software. It's just premature to do that till we have some kind of compromise and track record or agreement between the parties that says this is a reliable plan to execute. We have officially moved from unstable to stable. So hopefully that makes sense. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you do have comments or questions or suggestions for other case studies, and we will move into more complex case studies that show more models and even more investment related ideas. For now, if you do have comments, questions, please supply them in the comments. I'm certainly open to building case studies like this for anybody who watches these videos and wants to throw out some hypothetical situations that we can review together. This tool, by the way, is called Right Capital. You can look at it online if you're interested. There are plenty of good financial planning tools out there that you can also look at. Anyways, this is where we'll wrap up. Thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. As always, thanks for your time and attention watching today's video. Before you take off, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and if you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comments section below. We answer every comment that's written. If you'd like to speak with our fee-only fiduciary financial planning team, you can schedule a free consultation on our website at www.thepeakfp.com. You can also find a ton of additional helpful guides, including a sample financial plan, a sample 3-bucket strategy, and much, much more on the website at www.thepeakfp.com, which we'll link to in the description below. Thanks, and see you in the next video.